Yeah, thank you for that introduction. And thanks to Business World for giving me the opportunity to speak here today on a topic that I am personally passionate about and what we do professionally as investing. So I'll go to the personal level first. So I teach a course titled Sustainability, Business and Society at Ahmedabad University, where 81 MBA students come. And the sessions, we have 29 sessions I take out time for. And that is for creating awareness in the younger generation to say, look, what is sustainability? Sustainability investing is not CSR. Sustainability is something that, as was said earlier by Mr. Narola, a mindset change that needs to happen. That sustainability needs to form a part of the fiber of life. I'll actually begin with two quotes from Climate Week in New York, where it's currently going on, so I've been following it remotely. So one is by the head of the UN, Dr. Antonio Guterres, who said, the efforts to address the climate crisis have come up abysmally short. The second is by Climate Week CEO, saying that there is only one answer: relentless determination. We have the means and largely the solutions, now it's up to our determination. So both of these quotes, and the reason I mention them is because I just read them last night as we were following the sessions going on in New York, to say that, look, they signify a number of things actually, and before we get to that, some of the comments that broadly are made about sustainability and climate is that, look, we will pass the 1.5 degree Celsius limit soon, which has not happened in a million years. There's a Stockholm Resilience Institute that talks about planetary boundaries, and you will pass into uncharted waters, and one doesn't know what the consequence of that may be if it's exceeded. The effects are seen everywhere. So what can we do about it? Is it something to accept? Actually, I think not. Actually, I think it's something where you need to understand the issues, be aware of the issues, and take steps as necessary to address it. You know, Mr. Vishwanath spoke about things from a corporate angle, and I will speak about the other SDGs that we at Peak Sustainability Ventures use to make our investments. So it will tell you that to approach these 17 sustainability development goals, each individual, whether it's an investor, a CEO, a company, or a consumer, they all, and the government, all have to play their respective roles to make the effort successful. This is not the job or the effort of one person that is likely to lead to success. It's a cohesive, coordinated effort that is needed to address these issues. So what is sustainability investing? So for us, sustainability investing means that it has to serve two objectives. One is it has to have what are returns or financial returns to make the investment sustainable. But B, it has to meet the sustainable development goals. And the ones that we have chosen to address, which are different and other goals than what has been done at Randstad, are the following. So the four areas where we invest in are new energy, which is everything that allows us to have the energy transition from fossil fuels to what are renewables, hydrogen, and other sort of biofuels and other new energy initiatives that are necessary to make the transition away from that. The second is food systems. This includes agriculture, but is not limited to agriculture because a lot is involved post-agriculture. To say, look, how do we sustainably feed 8 billion people and soon to be 10 billion in the world? The third is water, and often ignored, but one of the most important requirements of life. And how do we deal with issues of groundwater, surface water, quality of water, quantity of water? And the last is the broad areas of climate, which include biodiversity, as was mentioned earlier, plastics, and other areas. So our investments have to be the ones that meet these criteria of sustainability. And rather than talk about it in theory, I thought that I would just use examples from where we have invested to demonstrate that these investments can not only be huge success stories in certain instances and profitable, but at the same time lead to outcomes that benefit society, the company, and the environment. What we do here is evaluate technologies globally to address India's issues and assist in achievement of our goals. See, the way we think is that innovations can occur anywhere in the world, and we need to pick the best technologies globally that address India's needs. And this is no different than how Indians are used to consume in today's world, whatever are products or services offered by global companies. I mean, if you look at any individual's lifestyle, just look at WhatsApp, Netflix, Amazon, Microsoft, all are global companies. But we use geo when it comes to sort of data. So we'll use the best products globally, and that's the mindset that we are applying to say, look, time is not on our side with respect to many of these climate issues. So we should look at technologies wherever they are and see if we can bring them to India. And there are some examples of how we can make this happen. India is the 5th largest economy, soon to be the 3rd or 4th largest soon. And we have a key role to play and, in this global sustainability journey. And what we are doing here is backing founders who attempt to solve tough problems in climate. We are not doing anything that is a platform, but we are working with people who solve tough problems in climate and are building scalable solutions that can address many of the climate issues. Let me show you examples in 3 categories. Investments that were done much earlier by the partners and the firm, which are now very successful investments. So that will tell you that, look, this is not something where a company in this space is not profitable. The second set will be investments done recently, that is in the last year, to say, look, where are we currently seeing opportunities? And the third will be areas where we see amazing opportunities, emerge in the next few years. Let's talk about the success stories first. First one is a company called Viatech Wabag, where we were pre-IPO investors. Today calls itself one of the top 5 water companies in the world. They just got awarded a 4,400 crore project in Chennai to do 400 million liters of drinking water for the population. So this tells multiple things. One is these companies and the projects can be very sizable. B, in certain areas, the government investment needs to step in because the government has to pay the bill, but ultimately the beneficiary is to say, look, desalinated water for society. And there's a question asked that, look, desalination is expensive. And my question to that is, expensive to what? I mean, water is a basic necessity. And if a city can be provided water, that represents sort of one of the primary roles of the government. And if you're in a watershed area and there are not other sources of water available, this is an investment that is absolutely necessary. This company is doing 8 projects worth about $1.5 billion on Namami Gange, purifying the water in Ganga to bring Ganga back to what glory was earlier. Another company in the portfolio is a company called Wari Energies, which makes solar panels. It was like a company doing 200 megawatts of panels in 2015 when we joined the board and invested. Today they make 13 gigawatts of solar panels and supply it to India and the world. So if you multiply the effects of the installations done over the years for 25 years and you say, look, how is this company assisting in the transition to a renewable energy future? The numbers are staggering. I'm not even going to bother to calculate numbers, but you do the math to say units of power generated by these panels over a period of 25 years in a global setting. The third one is in EVs actually, where we look at things from a more efficiency and reliability standpoint. So the company I talk about is Ion Energies, which does battery management systems for EVs, which says, look, how do I extract value from the battery and prevent fires? As was said by the earlier speaker, it's very hard to measure how many fires are prevented by a much more improved battery management system. And if you get more efficiency, I think one of the core principles of energy is to say, look, resource efficiency has to be established. How can you do sort of more for less? How can you use energy efficiently? And if ion allows you to extract power from the battery a lot easier, then that's what generates a lot of sustainable outcomes. The fourth is in the food systems, because that's not been talked about, but a company called Parvata Foods, two graduates from IIM Ahmedabad, today run what is the largest manufacturing unit in the Northeast for ginger as well as turmeric, but representing one of the largest units there. And they have trained 10,000 farmers in addition to the work they do to have better agricultural practices and improve yield. They don't benefit from the improved yield, the farmer does, but they get privileged access, not because they get a lower price, but because the farmer feels that, look, if you have helped me increase my yield, then you're paying me the same price as the other person. I'm of course going to sell to you. So you can have profitability as well as sustainability in terms of how you run your business. And the last example I'll give you is an international one by a company called GIST Impact. So GIST stands for Global Initiative for a Sustainable Tomorrow. And we have 120 data scientists and environmental engineers working on impact intelligence and working with some of the world's largest banks, FMCG companies, investors, sitting out of Mumbai, but serving the world. So you can see India can become an amazing center for supplying these solutions globally. So these are some of the investments that we can demonstrate that, look, this generates returns and has generated impact. Some of the investments done recently, which I also believe will lead to substantial benefits, and the reason I'm giving examples is it's easier to talk for an investor by way of example than a theoretical construct. The one is a company where we have invested in building materials out of Finland, and we are bringing that technology to India. They are in wood manufacturing or wood modification, which can give wood the same tensile strength of steel and dimensional stability of cement. And India will be the world's largest user of cement of steel in 2025, and one of the world's largest of concrete. So if you can substitute building materials, which are one of the largest emitters of CO2, you don't realize that it's not only when you start the car that CO2 is emitted. I think in steel, cement manufacturing, which are also very hard to abate sectors, the consumption of energy can be very high. The second, we talked about plastics, but plastics, if we just invested in a company that can allow plastics to biodegrade in the ambient conditions in the natural environment, and if that happens, then you have found what is a solution to how you can safely dispose of plastics, which otherwise can remain in the atmosphere for a very long time. But when you compare plastics, it's not plastics versus zero. You have to compare it to the footprint of glass, aluminum, paper, cloth, and then the numbers become very different. I think the way an investor thinks is not to be so emotional about it, but to calculate the hard numbers. And if you calculate the numbers on aluminum, and you go back to bauxite, then you find that the aluminum can be even worse than plastic, actually. And if you calculate paper and cloth, then you say it doesn't serve the purpose of liquids, bacteria, longevity, odor, many other things. So I think it's a question of responsible use of a material as opposed to, effectively banning a material, and at the same time, responsible disposition of a material through a biotransformation process which does not leave any microplastics at all. The other one is a company called Indra Water, which is doing wastewater recycling for some of the SMEs in the country, and they just did a large project for Unilever. And this allows reuse of water, which then what does is allows enough water availability for the people who are end consumers of water. And the last one I should mention is a hemp company, where we are looking at substituting hemp for cotton, which has 1/7 of the environment footprint of cotton. And the feel of the cloth is actually much better. The hemp is a plant where every part of the plant can be used, actually. So you are kind of able to generate sustainability. And we had a meeting last month with Puneet Lalbhai, actually. And I think I was amazed. I'm shifting to what corporates do, but I was amazed at the initiatives Arvind Mills is taking on sustainability. We want to be zero water, zero net zero much ahead of time. We work with 100,000 cotton farmers to see how we can effectively improve their livelihood, how we can use cotton stock in our boilers to ensure that it is not dumped and goes to waste. So 360-degree approach to how we think about effectively the way we work through our supply chain and systems in terms of sustainability. So these are some of the examples that we believe in the next 2 years will demonstrate significant growth, because this is coming. I think any large company looking at CSR or regulation to say that should drive my sustainability journey is behind the curve. I think it's going to be investors and consumers who are already driving it globally. Perhaps in India, the effect is not yet felt, but it will be felt. And when it is felt in the larger companies, it goes up the supply chain because people are going to scope 3 emissions. And we are working with 4,000 of UPS's end users to calculate their emissions for UPS actually. So this is happening, and it will happen sooner than people imagine. So anybody wanting to begin the sustainability journey, I think being proactive and beginning it is a better outcome than waiting for the regulations to tell you that it's about time. Some of the new initiatives, and I won't go into that in detail, but just to mention, would be in hydrogen. We have done work on about 50 hydrogen companies globally, but it still takes some time to invest. In solar panels, there's some very interesting innovation going on, where how do you have more renewables and at the same time protect the land for agriculture? So there's someone working on agrovoltaics, which is a translucent cell where you say the red wavelength of sunlight is much better for plants and the blue spectrum for solar. So can you build a panel which can actually allow the red to go through, and you build a higher structure to allow agriculture and energy on the same piece of land? So these are sort of transformative innovations that we spend time thinking about. All may not be investable today, but you need to follow a company's journey much earlier to be able to invest at the right time. But this is the kind of way people are thinking to say, look, let's look at agrovoltaics to double the use of, it's almost cheating in the sense you're not using land for energy or agriculture, but energy and agriculture. And these are the kind of innovations that can happen. Moving to a broader perspective, I think from a company standpoint, the way it works is that funds like ours provide the catalytic capital, and then once it is mainstream, companies can effectively take the initiative, which is what is happening in solar today, where solar and EVs are essentially now OEMs have started taking effectively much larger pieces of capital inputs because the risk is lower, and now it's ready to scale. The second thing corporates can do, which is it's like no journey for net zero can begin without looking at resource efficiency. I mean, IFC has a very interesting way of saying it: avoid, mitigate, recompensate. If you can avoid the use of energy. If you can't, mitigate the use of energy and then only recompensate. So any corporate sort of saying, okay, I have my usage of X, I'll put solar panels for X, is actually not doing it efficiently. You should first say, can I reduce X to 0.8X? And then effectively move to see how we can get to recompensate. But I think where large companies, even like Marico, whom we work with, are driving the sustainability journey. And that's where some of the earlier speakers mentioned profitability. But if your buyer, which is a large company, is required by their investor to ensure scope 3 emissions across the full value chain are maintained, then they require it from their upstream suppliers. So effectively, you are getting into a system where a responsible corporate has to audit the supply chain to see how sustainable they are. So that's how, in water reuse, in terms of energy input, corporations can drive it. Government is already driving it in India by the initiatives in policy as well as the subsidies, etc., that have been given. Lastly, about the consumer. no journey in sustainability is complete without the consumer. I think I'll just ask, one question to say, look, are we responsible consumers? I mean, paying bills or paying your electricity bill doesn't allow you to just leave the light on when you don't need it. I mean, it's not a question of just irresponsible consumption. Second is, there's a concept in energy called rebound effect, which is when something is either zero cost or low cost, we tend to use it a lot. I mean, one example that touches all our lives is WhatsApp. I mean, if we ask ourselves the question, how many WhatsApps would we send if it cost us 5 rupees? And then you see how the number would drop. And you don't have to pay it, but if you apply that filter, you will send the WhatsApps that are necessary. I mean, I have friends who go on holiday and send me 45 pictures. I said, just send me one picture. Because when this is stored in a cloud, there's no cloud in the sky, it's in a data center. And the usage of energy in data centers is going into, it's like almost the same energy as in the manufacturing of steel. So when we talk about sustainability, it's almost like looking at our own behavior and saying, look, can we reduce the footprint on energy in terms of how we move forward? I think that's about what I wanted to talk about. A lot more can be said, but I think we can discuss over lunch, etc. Some of my, ending comments would be that, look, capital requirements are huge. Sustainability transition is not going to be easy. But at the same time, it's not something that, we are most optimistic in terms of saying that, look, if done well, it can clearly be mainstream and we can effectively work our way through these issues in terms of, emissions, etc. But I think one or two last points is to say, look, focusing only on CO2 emissions is just a bad idea, actually. I think there is a whole concept of natural capital that needs to be focused on, which is how are you using fresh water? How are you dealing with waste? What is the land use change you have? What is the air pollution? I mean, the discussion on sustainability has to encompass broader aspects of natural capital. I think while the situation is difficult, we have ability and expertise to what is called bend the curve and ensure that we can do what is known as climate, mitigation as well as adaptation in the years ahead. The last 2 points is that we are in this together, all of us and globally. I mean, there is no separate parts per million. There is 425 parts per million of CO2. It doesn't get allocated that this is the US and this is India and this is China. I mean, this is all one. Anything that we do or don't do affects everybody. Time is not on our side, which means that while we all are optimistic, it doesn't mean we are optimistic enough to sit around and do nothing. I think it's a time for kind of urgent action, which is immediate, and I think actions need to be big. Lastly, I'll end by a quote said a generation ago, that the future is unwritten. It will be shaped by our collective actions and or inactions. Thank you.